Thank you. Terrorists create fear. They seek a wild reaction. It's time for us to take a deep breath and evaluate all the threats, not just based on the last 24 hours, but looking at the last decade. ISIS is not the most dangerous threat, nor the most evil. I would argue that the Iran-led Shiite alliance is at least as evil and is more dangerous. That alliance of Iran, Assad, Hezbollah, and the Houthi, they've killed far more Americans than ISIS, whether it be the Beirut bombing of our Marines decades ago or the IEDs that were used against us in Iraq and Afghanistan. Iran and Syria have both had nuclear programs. Iran and Syria, that is to say Assad, have killed tens of thousands of, hundreds of thousands of innocent people, while ISIS has killed tens of thousands. But ISIS has bad taste, and Assad has good taste. ISIS will glorify in the deaths of 50 people. Assad will barrel bomb and kill 1,000 people and then have the good taste to deny it. It is said that the enemy of your enemy is your friend, as Netanyahu mentioned when he spoke to us in the Middle East. The enemy of your enemy may be your enemy. Part of our effort against ISIS and in the world is to show compassion, demonstrate that compassion to our friends in Europe and the Middle East. And 99% of that compassion, at least, is helping refugees who are in the Middle East. That's where there are millions of people. And we have been the most generous country. The solution to this problem is not to depopulate Syria of all but its 15% Alawite minority. The solution is to allow Syrians to live in a reasonable and peaceful country. And while maybe 1/10 of 1% of the displaced will come here as refugees, and that is the big controversy, it is the rest of Syria that we need to focus on. Many of us in the Foreign Affairs Committee have tried to help the Syrian moderates. For years, the administration wouldn't do it, and then they failed at it, and one element of that failure is they insisted that those they arm swear that they wouldn't wage war against Assad. What reasonable Syrian wouldn't wage war against Assad? If I was a Syrian, I would be waging war against Assad. So this vetting process has gone crazy and has failed. Of course, we focus on the refugees. We may take a few hundred a month. Let's look at the risks and compare it to the other risks that we do take. Refugees, yes, have Syrian passports. Let's look at other passports. On 9/11, over 3,000 Americans were killed by people with Saudi passports. And governors around this country are recruiting Saudi businessmen to come visit and invest in their states. Since 9/11, the biggest terrorist attack in the United States was committed by Nadal Malik Hassan, who killed 13 Americans. He was born in the United States and a major in the United States Army. And in Paris, most of those committing these crimes held European passports. They can come to the United States with a visa waiver program, and those same governors have tourist office in Europe showing them pictures of iconic sites in America they may want to come and visit. So we have 320 million Americans here who could be radicalized. We've got 13 million a year European visitors who come here with no vetting. We have 1 million Greater Middle East visitors who come here with modest vetting. And then we have a few hundred people who come here after a 2-year vetting process. Which should we be most concerned about? General Keane, you pointed out we're not serious about this war, and we're not. In World War II, we bombed military targets. And as you point out, we couldn't have a zero civilian casualty strategy. We bombed oil fields. We're not doing that to ISIS because we want to recover those oil fields in good shape. That's absurd. And certainly the Iraqi government is not serious. It's paying salaries to people in Mosul. I don't think General de Gaulle was dropping money on occupied France to pay salaries of unemployed French teachers and civil servants. And of course, when $500 to $800 million of Iraqi currency was seized, they didn't print new currency because that would have inconvenienced corrupt politicians in Baghdad. The Iraqi government was installed by the United States. That doesn't mean it's not part of the problem. It's a tool of Iran and an oppressor of Sunnis that recruits for ISIS, that thereby recruits for ISIS. The Europeans aren't serious. The Danes have a policy that when fighters return, they have a welcome and watch program. Obviously, certainly because 2 NATO countries have been attacked, United States and France in different decades, Denmark and others ought to have a policy that if you fight for ISIS or you fight for al-Qaeda, that is a criminal offense. And finally, we do not study our enemy well, or our adversary and our potential friends well. We have a State Department with experts in every kind of law except Islamic law. We take a few courses at Princeton. We need people who would qualify as doctorates at Al-Azhar in Cairo. And until we have that kind of expertise, we will not understand what drives ISIS. I think I've used up too much of my time. I'll yield back.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Rohrabacher.